In this training, we're going to be looking at a couple different strategic scenarios from a marketing perspective. Your startups or de novos, established providers, turnarounds, acquisitions, growth, and scaling. Each of these scenarios require a different marketing playbook. And so we're going to talk through some of those considerations and the ways to think about the different scenarios that you may have within your healthcare organization. So let's start up with startups and de novos. So this is important for if you are brand new to the particular healthcare vertical or healthcare service line you're providing, as well as if you are an established provider opening up a new location or even starting a new service line. When we start a new service line, we should be thinking about it in the same way as we would a startup in many senses of the word. Pro forma planning is obviously your starting point. And then from a marketing perspective, how much money are we going to be spending on marketing when we start this new location or this service line? I always tell providers to be very conservative in their marketing estimates here. A lot of providers, for whatever reason, they hear there's a lot of demand, they hear the space is hot, they think that they're going to have kind of a field of dreams scenario where if we build it, they will come. That almost never happens. For most healthcare verticals, you're talking about an 18-month window until you start to break even from a cash flow standpoint, including your marketing budget. So sometimes you will have providers, especially if in the Medicaid space, there can be a dearth of providers within Medicaid. And so it's very possible to open up a location for healthcare services that provides care to Medicaid, and that can be break even within 6 months sometimes. Every once in a while, you have a provider that gets lucky and they get break even at 3 months. We should never, ever be creating a pro forma based on the best case scenario. We should always be really conservative. So we have a marketing budget that needs to be set for 18 months, committing to it, and then knowing that we're probably going to lose money. If you want to get a sense of how to think about your marketing budgets and what those costs should be, go over to the training on capital allocation and budgeting, and that will give you a really strong sense of how to think about what you should be budgeting. But just know here that we're going to say we need a consistent budget for this 18-month period until we break even. Also, we're going to need often a bigger budget. We're unknown in the marketplace. We're probably competing uphill because there are established providers, people that the community already refers to, people that the community already knows, organizations that have built a good SEO foundation. So rather than us just going to Google and saying, hey, we're here, why don't you start ranking us? We have to say, hey, we're here, and we now need to show you why we're better and should be ranked versus these established providers in the marketplace. So oftentimes it's going to cost us more from a marketing standpoint to attract patients and build a reputation than it would if we were an established provider. So plan to be spending a pretty good chunk of money on your marketing budget and then being consistent with it. The thing that you should never do is say, well, what can I do from a marketing standpoint that's going to get us patients tomorrow profitably? I get asked this quite a bit by inexperienced business owners, and they're trying to say, hey, if we give you $1, are you going to give us 2 back? That is not how marketing works. Marketing is a reputation build. Marketing takes time. You need sophisticated multi-channel strategies. You need multiple touch points. There's no scenario in most instances where you are able to run a marketing campaign and then get a very immediate and clear return on that investment. You need to be thinking in 6-month timeframes, 12-month timeframes as a startup or a de novo build. You have limited resources when you are starting a new organization. Oftentimes we'll see things like the person doing community outreach is also answering the phone. They've got the cell phone in their pocket. This is really inefficient. It's ineffective. Why? Because we want the person doing outreach to be talking to more people from an outreach standpoint, building relationships, driving referrals. And if they're on the phone, they can't be doing that. Vice versa, if they're talking to someone in the middle of an outreach conversation, they can't answer the phone in their pocket. And that's a big deal because if someone doesn't answer the phone now, that patient isn't going to wait around for a call back. They're going to call a competitor. So we're losing effort and we're losing opportunity by trying to have one person do two different job functions and then not being able to do either one well. The same thing happens from a direct marketing perspective. A lot of small organizations will try to hire a jack of all trades marketer, someone that does SEO and graphic design and content writing and videography and social media and PPC campaigns. There is no such thing as a person that does any of these all well. There are definitely people that might be able to do one or two of these things well, and then they're going to be mediocre to inexperienced at the other areas of the marketing delivery. So that's not an effective use of your spend. A better use of spend is going to be outsourcing to an agency. Even on my end for a small provider, we're going to have at least 8 people assigned to a campaign. So I've got a content writer, I've got an editor, I've got an SEO specialist, I've got a paid media specialist, I've got graphic design, I've got data analytics, I've got someone that sees the overall strategy, right? There's all these providers that have to have their individual expertise. To hire that internally is going to cost you over $500,000 in labor. It makes a lot more sense to outsource that to an agency where you can get 8 people on a fractional level for a significantly reduced cost. Right? Most marketing agencies are going to have lower tier packages for small providers that are around $60,000 to $120,000 a year. That is the same cost as trying to hire a pretty decent marketing director who's going to do a whole bunch of things to a very mediocre degree. What's our channel strategy for startups and de novos? So there's 2 ways to think about this. First of all, how are we getting patients in the door? There is only one channel that will get patients in the door immediately or in a very, very short time frame, like 30 days, and that is going to be PPC. Primarily Google ads, maybe some Bing ads. These are people that are searching for your services right now. So if we get in front of them, there's a higher probability that they're going to take action and actually utilize our services in the nearer term. The problem, PPC is our most expensive marketing channel. For a lot of healthcare service providers, it's not cost effective to run PPC campaigns. They will actually lose money on them overall because the cost per new patient acquisition is more expensive than the margin they have available to spend on marketing. So you're saying, Nick, if that's the case, why in the heck would I do PPC campaigns if I'm going to be losing money on them? Now, again, we have to be thinking from our pro forma standpoint where we're going to lose money for the first 6 to 18 months. That should be built into our expectations here. But we need patients in the building. How are we going to build a reputation as a provider in this community? How are we going to make people aware of us if we're not getting patients in? So what PPC does for most providers is, while it's a loss leader, it starts to help us build that reputation. There's also patients in the building, and so that way it looks full, it looks busy when other people come in. There's downline value. If we do a good job, those patients are going to refer to us, or they're going to report back well to the referral partner that brought them in, or maybe they have a colleague that works in the hospital and they say good things about us. There's all these advantages of bringing patients in, even if we're doing it at a loss. What we'll often do with like Medicaid providers who are higher volume, we might have 80% of their facility for new patient capacity filled with PPC, and then we'll drop it 10% month over month. So we'll do 80% of patients coming in from PPC month 1, and then we'll try and do 70% month 2 and 60% month 3. Now, if we were in network, out of network, or private pay, PPC costs get really, really high for most service lines in healthcare. So then we're probably going to try and just get about 50% of patients at existing capacity for a new location or a new service line, because from a cost standpoint, it can get pretty cost prohibitive if we're trying to get all of the patients in. There are certain scenarios that we've seen in healthcare verticals where at one point in time, there were crazy reimbursement rates, right? We saw this with behavioral health after the Mental Health Parity Act. Insurance didn't really have benchmarks. They didn't have codes for these behavioral health services. And so they were paying huge amounts. And in those situations, you could literally bleed money out the bottom of the business and you could still make money. You could be setting money on fire and doing everything wrong from a fiscally responsible, sustainable business standpoint and still make money because the reimbursements were so sky high. Now, of course, insurance figured that out pretty quickly. And within a decade, they had slashed reimbursement rates by anywhere from 50 to 75%. from what providers had been getting originally. And now that really leaky boat, that bad business model that was burning money left and right, is no longer sustainable. So there are these moments in time where you can kind of get away with really high cost marketing channels and it's going to be effective for your campaigns. But the vast majority of the time, you don't want more than 10% of your admissions in a non-startup phase coming from PPC. Again, I'd go to our capital allocation and budgeting training if you want to get a better sense of some of the nuance around how we think about that. Now, from our other channel strategies, we have to be investing right away in addition to PPC. PPC is really expensive, so how do we bring our cost per new patient acquisition down? We're going to do that by building outreach, by building search engine optimization, by building paid media channels. As those get ramped up and we start hitting our frequency touch points and we start getting our foundations built in terms of reputation in the community or reputation with Google, that's going to allow our cost per new patient acquisition to come down. And so we can become less reliant on PPC over time. But we have to start those channels right away. It takes time to build up a reputation with Google for search engine optimization. It takes time for an outreach rep to build relationships, to find the contacts, to figure out where they should be investing their time. All of these things, because there's a time component to them, the longer we delay when we're doing a startup, the longer we are going to be paying really high PPC costs, or the longer we're just going to be sitting at a really low volume of patients, which is probably not going to be sustainable for the business. Now, there is one other way to look at this. We could say that we're going to drop the PPC and we are just going to invest in these long-term channels and we're happy to wait 6 months for that to really start churning. That's a viable strategy. It could potentially work. I usually caution against it. And the reason for that is because reputation is so critical to most healthcare providers that we want patients in the door now. So we're generally willing to pay more from a marketing standpoint in the beginning for a new location or a new service line to get patients in the door because of that downline value. It's going to send feedback to referral partners in the community. It's going to get referrals from those patients that had good quality care with us. That's going to build our online reputation for Google reviews. All these things have significant value long-term for us by having more patients now rather than having less patients now. Also, you have your fixed overhead, you have your labor costs, you have your other overhead costs. And if you don't have a certain number of patients in the building, you're going to often be losing more money. So even if we're paying and having a loss leader from the PPC side of things, it usually is not as much of a loss as if we didn't have patients or if we had a very small number of patients for a new location. So in general, as I mentioned, we want to outsource to reduce expenses. I've never encountered a de novo build or a startup that benefited by trying to build an internal team right away. It's just too expensive. Again, new business owners or even strategic acquirers or larger organizations don't have internal expertise around marketing, so they don't know who to hire. They don't know how to train. They don't know what resources to provide, what MarTech is needed. All these factors make it really expensive for a startup to try to do things internally. They are much better served by outsourcing. Again, if you can work with an agency that's going to charge you $60,000 a year for really basic campaigns, you're not even going to be able to find any marketer that is going to work for that has any high level of expertise. And even if you find an individual that might write content for you, well, then you're not getting SEO. Then you're not getting paid media expertise. Then you're not getting graphic design, right? So why would you choose one person when you could have a team of 8 to 20 people working on your project, all with really high levels of expertise? So you should always be thinking about outsourcing in your pro forma. Talk to different marketing agencies, find out what their costs are, find out what the expected return rates are in terms of timelines, and then budget appropriately. Market analysis is super important. It's something that a lot of startups don't do, surprisingly. So I was just talking with a healthcare provider on the West Coast last week. They're opening up a new facility. And I said, well, what are you doing differently than competitors in the marketplace? And they said, well, nothing. We just heard that there's a need, and so we're trying to fill the need here. There's almost nowhere in the country for any healthcare service line that does not have demand met by current providers. If there was more demand for the current providers, they would be expanding themselves already. They would be growing to meet that need. If they're not growing, there's a reason for it. It's because they're already struggling to have enough patients to fill their facilities as it is. So if you're going in as a new provider, you have to understand, well, one, what is the total addressable market? Like, really, what are the number of patients available to come in for that particular service line in the radius that you're able to serve? So that gives us our total addressable market. And then secondarily, how are we going to get patients into our facility, because that addressable market need is already being met? Again, there's no field of dreams here. There's no, if you build it, they will come. We have to really be strategic and understand what we're going to do better than what's already on offer, because that's the only way we're going to compete. I've got a new location. I've got 20 other competitors in that area with established reputations. The community is already referring to them in terms of referral partners. The community already knows who they are. They have a certain level of trust, hopefully, if they've done things well. They have their SEO built up already. We're coming in and we're trying to work uphill to then basically steal patient volume from these other providers. It's a zero-sum game in those markets. What have we done from an analysis standpoint to say this is the right place for us? We think we can add value here. We think that we can do things better. We can do things cheaper. We can do things quicker. Whatever our differentiator is going to allow us to compete in this very crowded marketplace. Do a market analysis first. Do a competitive analysis to understand what's going to be effective for you. And then one thing we always recommend for new providers is to niche down. It is much easier and much more cost effective to focus on a small part of the market than a large part of the market. Go back to our 10 people in the room. If we've got a room with 10 people, how much money does it cost us to reach those 10 people? Not much. Now, if we reach all those 10 people, what's the likelihood that those 10 people in that one room are going to talk to each other? There's going to be a reciprocal, positive, virtuous circle of communication here where, let's say that one of those people come and enter our services. Well, they're going to tell everyone else in the room, especially if the other people in the room mention that they might be interested in the same services. Very positive, virtuous circle of support with very little marketing dollars. Now, imagine that we're in a big room with 1 million people. So now it's going to be super expensive for us to reach 1 million people, right? We have to spend a lot more money to get in front of all of them. And then on top of that, if I talk to 10 people here and then 10 people all the way on the other side of the room, which is really the other side of the city, what's the likelihood that they're going to talk to each other? It's not going to happen. It's a very, very small probability. And so there's no cumulative impact of our marketing spend. We're just basically kind of throwing some money into small little pockets here and there without a big impact. So that's not effective. So when we niche down, we want to think about geography. Is there a really local community that we can focus on? Are there particular demographics? Can we focus on veterans? Can we focus on individuals from the LGBTQ community? Can we focus on certain income demographics? Can we focus on certain age groups? Like, what can we focus on where it's going to be a really concentrated spend? Because if we think about, again, having that small number of people in the room, let's think about moms. Moms talk to each other. So moms as a group are much more likely to have cumulative impact for us than if we're trying to reach everyone. If we tend to have services that are really supportive and meaningful for the LGBTQ community, again, that's a community that tends to be pretty tightly knit. A lot of people are more likely to know each other than if we're just reaching the community at large. And so we get more value from a cumulative impact standpoint because we have focused spend. In addition to that, we become better at care delivery. If we're focused on the LGBT community or a certain age demographic or a certain income bracket, often they have very specific needs from a care standpoint. And as we just have them coming into our program, then we actually get better and better. We build our systems, we build our processes, we build our care delivery models around that patient demographic, so we develop expertise. So you see how there's a really virtuous positive feedback loop happening between concentrated marketing spend and our expertise as a care delivery provider. This is the exact opposite of what a lot of providers do. They come in with the mentality that, well, we want to accept all patients because we just need patients. And that's how we have to start off. And so if we accept everybody, then we're able to, be sustainable. And that is the absolute wrong way to think about it, because if you're trying to serve everybody, then you're serving nobody. Also, again, remember, you don't have cumulative impact. If we're really spreading our marketing spend, our marketing efforts really thin, then we have no virtuous feedback loop where people are talking to each other, people are referring internally. We don't have the tight-knit communities that are likely to be communicating with each other. So we have all these negative impacts of trying to go too big. And then finally, you have that bit around being competitive. Your competitors are already serving the community. So how do we focus and do something better or concentrate our marketing spend so it's effective? We do that by niching down. All right, so moving on from de novos or startups to an established provider, it's a very different marketing spend. If you're an established provider, you're probably doing something well. You've probably been successful to this point. Maybe you haven't even done much marketing. Maybe you had a first mover advantage, and so you were the first provider for this service line in that community. And so you didn't even have to do much marketing because people had to find you. You were the only game in town. There was nowhere else to go. If someone started asking around, if they did a Google search, the only thing that they would eventually find would be you. So you got all of the calls. That's great. Now that doesn't last, right? We live in a capitalist society. When people see opportunity, they start to move in. If they see other people being successful, they will build competition to that. And that's just how capitalism works. It's really good. It keeps us on our toes and makes sure that we're focused on quality, right? There's all these advantages there, but it also presents challenges to established providers. One thing we want to do as an established provider is build a moat around our organization. It's defensive marketing. A lot of people think of marketing as acquisition oriented. I'm always trying to get new patients in the door. I want to make them aware of us. I want to convince them to try us, and I want them to convert, right? When we're an established provider, we have to think about the competition that is inevitably going to come in. Really simple example is a search engineization, or a really simple example is search engine optimization or SEO. If you're the only game in town, Google is going to rank you by default because there is no one else to rank for that search in that locale. Now, if you have a competitor come in and they start doing SEO and you've never done any, they're going to outrank you immediately because you don't have the content, you don't have the backlinks, you don't have the technical optimizations, and they do. So Google's like, oh, finally, here's a relevant provider. We know who to rank now. If you invest in SEO when things are going really well, now you're building a defensive moat around your organization because SEO is really sticky. If you do it well, a competitor can't come in and just knock you off of your top 1 through 3 rankings because it takes a ton of effort. It takes time, it takes money. They have to do it better. Google prefers organizations that have been at a certain rank for longer periods of time. That's actually an SEO signal. So you're getting more and more stickiness just by the fact that you've done this SEO for a long time. So instead of thinking and resting on your laurels and saying, okay, well, you know what? We don't need marketing here. We're going to save money and we're just going to take the net income boost. It's the wrong way to think about it because you have a lot of money. You're doing really well. You're successful. This is the time to invest in building your defensive moat. And that defensive moat, it can be SEO. That defensive moat can be reputation with the community. Again, think about your community outreach rep who's going out every day, building a relationship. You're investing in being a thought leader. You're investing in doing trainings for the community. And so you have all these people coming to you for CEU events. Now imagine a competitor comes in. You have all these really established relationships. They're going to have to fight uphill to try and get that. Why would a community partner refer to someone new when they've known you for years and they come to your CEU events, they trust you, they see you as a leader in the community? There's no reason for them to try the new provider in town. You're building that moat. You didn't need to do those CEU events. You had enough patients. All the patients were finding you already. They didn't have anywhere else to refer to anyway. They had to refer to you. But you're being proactive, you're being strategic and smart by investing in these things now. Same thing goes with community reputation. If we are not running Facebook campaigns, if we're not running X campaigns or TV campaigns, another provider can come in and start doing that and start to steal community mind share because we never bothered to build it up. Yes, of course, the patients that saw us, there's a reputation there, and they're probably talking to their friends and their family, but no one else in the community even knows who we are. The only reason people in the community are finding us is when they need our services, which is okay if we're the only game in town. But now you've got competition comes in. Nobody knows where to go until the point of need, except they start running Facebook campaigns, they start running TV campaigns. And so now when someone has the problem that you solve, they know to go to the competitor. They don't even have to do a Google search. They don't have to go and ask their PCP. They're not asking around to family and friends. So they've effectively cut you out of the community mind share, and then that's where your patient volume is going. It's really, really common for us to get a lot of providers that call and the conversation goes, hi, we used to be really successful. The phone was always ringing off the hook. We had a huge waiting list. And then I don't know what happened, but we don't get any calls. The phone's not ringing and everyone else seems to be doing better than us. Inevitably, I asked them, I said, well, what have you been doing for marketing? They said, well, we never did anything for marketing. Or we just had this one channel that we invested in. Or, we worked with a local partner that did some SEO for us. Well, of course, it wasn't very well done, or they weren't investing in those channels at all. Competitor comes in, starts investing in those channels, can be successful very quickly and steal all of your referrals, steal the community mind share, steal all the qualified inquiries, because as an established provider, you had rested on your laurels, you had not invested when you were doing well to build your moat. So always make sure you're investing in building a moat, because increasing competition will come in. This is capitalism, it's how it works. Even if it takes 10 years, it's going to happen. So we always want to be thinking forward thinking. We want to be getting ahead of the game and making sure that we have strong investments so that a competitor can't come in and just easily start to take some of that addressable market away from us. For a lot of established providers, they're starting to get into some kind of growth mode. They're expanding capacity, they're adding on providers, or adding on locations. As we start to do these things that lead to growth, especially for expanding capacity in the same location, we get into a situation that I called tiered growth. In any community, there's a certain number of high intent inquiries at any given time. People that really need our services and need them now or in the near future. We often don't have to pay as much from a marketing standpoint. They're searching for us, so we don't have to necessarily get in front of them. They don't need a lot of convincing. They've already decided that they need our services. So again, from a marketing standpoint, it is cheaper to connect with this very high intent group of people. So our margins for that group of people might be 30% because we're not spending as much on marketing. Now, as we grow, as we expand capacity, we've probably already tapped out that high intent demographic. So now we're getting to the demographic of people that need more education about our services, need more convincing. They're maybe debating to come to other providers and not as motivated to come to us specifically. Maybe they live farther away, and so it's just a hassle to come to us, and so they're just less likely to make that decision. So what's happening here is we're paying more money because we have to spend more time to get more frequency, to educate them more, to convince them to drive a farther distance, whatever the situation may be. So as we spend more money, that means that our margin on those patients is going to shrink. So as we grow, we will actually see increasing blended CAC, an increasing blended cost per new patient acquisition. In those situations, we're still doing well, right? Because we're getting that high intent group of people and we're making our 30% margin there. And then we're getting that second group of people and maybe we're only making a 15% margin, but it's additive. So blended CAC is going up, but also so is net income or EBITDA. We are increasing, which is what we want to see. We might have a third tier of people that we're reaching. These people live farther away. They're very unlikely to come in, or they need a lot of convincing. They're ambivalent about treatment. So we really have to spend a lot of money to market to them, to convince them to come in, to educate them on the benefits of our service. And so those people are even have smaller margins. But again, that's okay because it's additive. So even though our marketing costs are increasing, each of those tiers, we're adding EBITDA, we're adding net income, which is a positive for the organization overall. Now, of course, there is a point of diminishing returns where that's no longer valuable. We're breaking even or we're losing money. So there's going to be some point where we want to stop expanding. But just remember that there is this tiered component to growth for established providers. So just because you see your marketing costs increasing isn't necessarily a bad thing if you are trying to grow into markets or tiers of consumers or patients that need more marketing in order for them to utilize services. Also related to that is the way that you're communicating on your channels, the channels that you're using, the way that you're talking on the phone. So again, real simple example, from a PPC standpoint, these are people who are already looking for services. They know that they want or need what you're providing. In those situations, the call on the phone is very transactional. The ad campaigns are more transactional. You get on the phone and you say, yes, we have what you're looking for. Yes, we have availability. Yes, we take your insurance. When can we get you in? Very simple conversation. Now, as we expand those marketing campaigns out and we get into this mid-tier of individuals who are maybe a little bit more ambivalent, or they're just in the consideration stage of the patient journey, they need more convincing. So we're going to have to spend more marketing dollars to get them to start to consider us. But then when they call, they're evaluating us versus 5 other providers. And they've already done their research. They have all the websites pulled up. They've talked to a couple other providers. So that's no longer a transactional phone call. We have to be really good at selling our differentiation and explaining to that person that's inquiring why we are the right choice for them. Very different conversation. So as we've reached that tier, not only are we spending more marketing dollars, but we also have a very different way we have to interact with that patient population. And that's important because if you were just reliant on the high intent patient population and maybe your PPC outreach and SEO campaigns that were very transactional, your team doesn't know how to do it. Your team doesn't know how to market on Facebook. Your team doesn't know how to market on TV. They're probably going to try and copy your PPC campaigns and use the same messaging in a Facebook or a TV campaign. That doesn't work because these patients are at a different stage. They're in a different position psychologically. They need more effort. Same thing on the phone. What your call team is doing on the phone for a PPC or an SEO campaign is very, very different from the way they need to answer the phone for someone that's had a lot of TV or Facebook advertising as examples. As we get farther out, same thing. Now these people need a lot of convincing. They need a lot of effort. Those are different marketing campaigns or different conversations on the phone. So as you have tiered growth, the old adage that what got you here won't get you there applies. You have to be able to strategically understand that you're reaching these new tiered growth markets and that you're going to have different internal skill sets or vendors with different skill sets to be able to market and then convert these people once they inquire. As an established provider, we have to maintain our differentiation. So not only are we building a moat around what we're currently really good at, we also have to make sure that we're analyzing emerging trends. Are there situations happening, for example, in dentistry? Is there an evolution towards sedation dentistry? Is that something that we should be adding on? If we're a behavioral healthcare provider, are we adding on dual diagnosis, whereas before that wasn't a concern for most patients? Where a lot of patients are looking at trauma-informed care these days from a behavioral health perspective. Within the bariatric surgery community, we suddenly have to compete with these weight loss drugs. And so it creates an entirely different dynamic. We have a different marketing message that has to be put out into the community to educate and convince people why bariatric surgery might be a better choice for them than a weight loss drug. So these changing dynamics are things that we have to be on top of. Your marketing should be intimately involved with some of these decisions, and they should also be the front runners. They should be spearheading these conversations. When marketing is out in the community, whether it's getting comments on a social media post or a Facebook ad, whether it's the outreach team talking to people in the community, they're giving feedback in terms of what people are searching for. The marketing team on the SEO end is looking at search trends, and we can see that search volume for teen rehab is going down, but teen depression counseling is going up. How are we thinking about that? Are we talking about that with the care provider team? Are we talking about that with operations so that as an organization, we are moving in the right direction to maintain our success and to maintain our position as the quality provider or the preferred provider in the community? A comment with established providers is content creation. Usually as providers get bigger, they have bigger budgets, and so they'll start to invest a lot more money in things like podcasts or videos or YouTube channels. From a marketing standpoint, this can be great. It's really valuable to have all of these resources for people to access, different mediums for people to access. But a big mistake I see a lot of providers make is they have no ad spend tied to that content creation. You just spent all of this money to create a podcast or to create all of these really nice videos and nobody's seen them. I can't tell you how many times we will take on a provider and they have a podcast page and we look at it and there's 50 podcasts, all very well done, and nobody's watched them. They have like 10 downloads each. And those 10 downloads are probably the editing team and some other staff members. Why? Because there's no marketing budget for them. How are people going to find that podcast? Do they even know that you have a podcast? Do they know you have a YouTube channel? No, there's no way people are going to randomly find out about this. If you're going to invest the money in content creation, especially high level content creation, you need to have an adjacent budget that pushes that content out into the community through your ad campaigns, through email campaign, making sure your outreach team is talking about it, mentioning it. Are you marketing it internally to staff? Are you marketing it internally to your patients? These things are going to get it out into the community so that then you can start to have a positive feedback loop where maybe people start talking about it, they'll start sharing it with each other. But unless you're paying to get it out there, that process is never going to start. And very similar to your startups, your de novos, in-house versus outsourced marketing. For the vast majority of providers, outsourced marketing is going to be significantly cheaper with a better result. Real simple example, one of our larger clients had a team of 75 internal marketers. They were paying over $5 million a year in labor cost for their marketing campaigns across a couple different channels. We were able to come in and do the same exact services at a higher level for $1 million a year. Why were we able to come in at 5 times less the cost? Well, we know what we're doing. We don't have waste. They had a lot of different staff members that were stepping on each other's toes, that were working at cross purposes because they didn't have internal marketing expertise. They didn't know who to add. They didn't know what they needed. And so they just had all this bloat as people got slowly added to teams. Some manager over here decided they wanted something. A different manager over here added someone else onto the team because they wanted a specific thing at a specific time. And then there's no training. There's no accountability because there's no KPIs. No one knows what good social media looks like, good PPC campaigns look like, good SEO looks like. And so because there's no training, there's no accountability, there's no ongoing coaching, you just end up with a lot of fluff and a lot of bloat. And so for that reason, an outsourced agency can almost always provide significantly cheaper services with a better result. Other simple examples, like we'll go in with smaller providers and they'll have a content writer on staff. What do they need a full-time content writer for? I'm not quite sure, but that person's writing content that they're putting out on the website all the time. We're working on SEO. And then what's happening is that person will create a piece of content 3 months ago built into our SEO plan because we know that this particular silo is what we're working on and we want to rank for these particular key terms. And then this internal content writer will go write a very similar piece of content and throw it up. Well, now Google is confused. Now Google doesn't know which piece should be the piece it wants to rank. And so it chooses not to rank either of them. That's called cannibalism from an SEO standpoint. And so you've got this individual that's working on cross purposes because that person's a content writer. They don't have graphic design experience. They don't have web development experience. So they're throwing it up on the website with all kind of errors. They don't have SEO experience. And so they're not SEO optimizing the content. They don't have a strategic plan for their SEO. Social media is another one. We'll see a lot of providers that'll have a social media intern or a social media specialist, but that's like the only marketer that they've actually hired. And so that individual is going and boosting Facebook posts. Well, boosting a Facebook post is the most ineffective way to do paid media advertising. It doesn't have good targeting. It doesn't have good creative. And so you've got this person, they don't know any better because again, no one knows how to evaluate them in the hiring process. No one knows how to train them. No one knows how to give them direction or tell them what to do. And so you just end up with a person that's you're paying $70,000 a year when you could be hiring an outsourced agency for a little bit less than that and have them doing a whole ton of services. Okay, growth and scaling, whether we're a small provider that's trying to grow or an established strategic buyer or private equity firm that's trying to expand, how do we market when we're growing and scaling? First thing to think about is we need bigger budgets. Every time we move to a new location, we add on a new service line. Of course, we need people to be aware of that, and we have to spend money to make them aware of that, whether we're spending money on Facebook or spending money on labor costs in terms of having people going and knocking on doors or talking to people, whatever the situation is, we are spending some kind of money. So I'm regularly surprised by the number of providers that expand a service line and then don't expand their marketing budget. Like it doesn't make any sense, because you have to have more money if you want to try and get more patients in the door. The only time that's not the case is if you have this big waiting list, and the reason that you added on the service line or the location is you already had inquiry volume coming in for that and said, okay, well, we have all this inquiry volume, so why don't we expand? That's really smart. That's really smart. But for the vast majority of organizations, that's not the case. Or if it is the case, it doesn't fill the new location. It doesn't fill the new service. You still have to do marketing to make sure you're meeting your capacity goals. So bigger budgets, and then also related to bigger budgets, as I mentioned in the de novo slide section, it's going to cost you more. You don't have a reputation for this service line. You don't have a reputation as much in the new community that you're going into. And so it's going to be more expensive. You're going to have to pay more from a marketing standpoint to get the same result as you are currently in your established locations, your established service lines, because you have to build that reputation, right? Even if I'm adding on a service line from an SEO perspective, Google doesn't know that we do that service. And it definitely doesn't trust us in terms of doing that service yet. So as we start to add on SEO content and build our backlinks and do our technical optimizations, that's going to take time. We're going to have to spend a bunch of money on SEO up front for very little result in the beginning, until 6 months down the line, Google sees us as an authority or an expert within this particular community or locale, and then we'll start ranking us. So then we start to get an ROI on it, but we're going to have to pay a bunch of money up front. Separate P&Ls is really important too. I mentioned this in quite a few of the trainings because I think it's something a lot of executives miss. Each location and each service line should have its own P&L. And so you should have an SEO budget for each of those P&Ls. Each location, each service line has a SEO budget, it has a paid media budget, it has an outreach budget. You often cannot double up. Right? What we don't want to happen is we have a Facebook campaign that just adds on the locations that we're marketing to, or that just adds on an additional service line to the same campaign. We really want to localize those campaigns or target those campaigns to that service line. And so we need additional budget to do that. As we expand, we want to stay within our circle of competence. This goes back to brand and reputation. So if I'm a dentist, do I know anything about cardiac surgery? Obviously not. So a dental office is not going to expand into cardiac surgery. There is no reciprocal relationship there that makes sense. Now, an orthopedic surgeon might expand into physical therapy or vice versa. That would make a lot of sense because there's a really strong referral relationship there. Physical therapists are going to have patients that come in that need to be stepped up to surgery. You know, they went out last weekend, they were on the pickleball court and they tore the meniscus. So now they need a referral up. Vice versa, almost everyone coming down from surgery is going to need physical therapy. So that's a very synergistic relationship. There are shared referrals between those providers. And then we have a fixed marketing cost. So if I'm getting marketing, I'm paying so much to get a patient in for an orthopedic surgery, well, I get the income and the reimbursement from the surgery, and then I step them down to our physical therapy program. And now I also get the reimbursement income from the physical therapy, but I still have the same fixed marketing cost. So what I've done is I've taken a single marketing cost, but expanded EBITDA and revenue. Same thing, a behavioral health provider can do this. If you have a residential program, you're paying XYZ for your marketing cost, add on an outpatient facility. Now I can step them down, increase the total lifetime revenue of the patient on the same marketing cost. So those synergistic plays make a lot of sense, and you're staying within your circle of competence. Let's stay with the behavioral health example. If I'm providing mental health services, I can expand those to SUD services. The community will trust that. They can see how close mental health and SUD are. People know that most people struggling with addiction are also struggling with mental health issues and vice versa. So they're going to trust a provider that extends that brand reputation. If you're serving adults and you start to serve teens or children, that makes sense to people. They can understand how your circle of competence can grow incrementally to cover those services. But if you're a behavioral health provider, you're not going to add on orthopedic surgery. If you're an orthopedic surgeon, you're not going to add on a dental practice, right? Your circle of competence from a community standpoint doesn't translate. There's no added value there. So stay within your circle of competence. And then make sure that you're expanding within your circle of what I call the circle of reputation. When you think about it, we just talked about that marketing example of the 10 people in the room again. You build that in the communities in which you operate. So you have a reputation. Let's say you're in Los Angeles. So you have a reputation in Los Angeles. Do you have a reputation in San Diego or San Francisco? No, nobody knows you there. Yeah, you might have an oddball person that moves or something, but for the most part, there is no communication happening between Los Angeles and San Francisco within your particular service line and community. Now, if you're in LA, can you expand to other parts of LA? Yeah, because do your referral partners talk to each other? Do they have networks of nurses, networks of doctors, networks of counselors, networks of surgeons? Yes, absolutely. There are a lot of different, both professional and outside of work organizations or meetups or just social gatherings that are going to bring those people together. So you have a high chance that growing locally is going to allow you to capitalize on your existing reputation in that community. And you might go from maybe you're in the city and you start to go into the suburbs. There might not be as much crossover there, but you still probably have some reputation expansion that allows you to grow there. So why I bring this up is because often when we're dealing with private equity in particular, they will suddenly pop up locations across the country. And the thought process there is, okay, we have a model down in terms of our operations, in terms of staffing, in terms of care delivery. We're going to copy paste that, plop it down here. That's perfectly fine from the operational side of things, but from the marketing side, they have no reputation. Right? If we're in LA and we open up exact same program, facility, services in Denver, Colorado, we're starting from scratch from a marketing standpoint. We're starting from scratch for SEO. We're starting from scratch from outreach. We're starting from scratch for our paid media campaigns, for our community relationships. And so for that reason, it's going to be really, really hard. We're going to have to spend a lot more money from the marketing standpoint in this location that's halfway across the country or in another state compared to if we had expanded locally. This is why most healthcare systems expand locally. They don't explode across the country because of the marketing costs. An established provider also has built a reputation over years. So sometimes we'll see both established kind of strategic expansion or PE expansion, your private equity expansion, where they will start to pop across the country and then not understand why they're not doing well. Well, you built a really strong reputation over 8 years in your community. People know you, they trust you. They don't trust you in this other location. They don't even know who you are in this other location. On top of the fact that you're climbing uphill. You have all these established providers in the new community that you now need to steal patients away from, more or less, because they're already going to the competitors that were in the market before you came in. That is an uphill climb that's really, really hard to overcome. There's no reputation expansion. So expand your reputation slowly, gradually within the communities in which you operate, and you will find that you are much, much more successful than if you're trying to expand to farther distances. A note on that is the first mover advantage. Too, oftentimes for the provider that was really successful for the past 8 years, they were usually the provider that opened first. And so they had that dynamic where they were the only game in town. People were going to find them from an SEO standpoint. They were going to find them from a referral standpoint. Everyone in the community referred to them because there was nowhere else to go. So that allowed them to build a reputation without competition in their environment, which makes them really successful today. They move into that new market, that first mover advantage is gone. Over the past 8 years, over the past decade, people have seen the opportunity. We live in a capitalistic society, and they opened their own facilities in those new locations that this provider is now moving into. So they don't have that first mover advantage. It's not going to go the same way as it did when they opened that location. So we can't look at the past as a model for the future when we're thinking about growth and scale. Acquisitions, how do we think about acquisitions? Most large providers, especially if you're private equity backed, are going to be growing through acquisition. It is usually much easier to do that than it is to do de novo, even if it's a low cost de novo situation. You want to capitalize on the reputation, you want to capitalize on the systems and processes. So when we're thinking about acquisitions from a marketing standpoint only, one of the questions that comes up is old brand versus new brand. This doesn't have a single answer. It really depends on the reputations of both the acquirer and the acquired. Let's take Intermountain. Intermountain has a fabulous reputation for healthcare in the communities in which it operates. So if Intermountain acquires another program or facility, it's probably advantageous for Intermountain to then assign their name to it because that positive brand reputation is going to carry over. We believe that Intermountain provides quality healthcare. They've acquired this facility. They're going to take their same standards, their same training, their same high quality care delivery, and they're going to use it at this new facility so that trust grows with them. Vice versa, let's say that you're an unknown provider and no one knows who you are. So in that situation, adding your name to that new facility has minimal advantage. What if that facility that you're acquiring has a great reputation? Well, now you're actually creating confusion in the marketplace because the exact opposite is happening. So they don't know who you are. They don't know what your quality is. You've taken over. Is it going to be the same? Are these people any good? Are they going to tank the quality of this new facility that they just bought? Because we've seen that before. New ownership comes in, private equity comes in, and suddenly quality goes down. That is a common narrative that you'll hear within communities, within healthcare. And so that can be a negative by bringing your name over. Now, if it's a moot point, if that organization doesn't have a great reputation, you don't really have an established reputation, then it doesn't really matter. One suggestion that we often have is to add the name to the new acquisition. So especially if the new acquisition has a really good reputation, you might not want to change that name. It's better not to a lot of the time. So you might say new acquisition, a part of our healthcare system. And so you've got their name and then under it, you've got your name. That's a really good way to start transitioning and blending the two. And so then actually their positive reputation will start to spill over to your reputation, ideally, as long as you don't mess anything up through the acquisition, that has a very, very positive aspect from the marketing angle. Now, one other thing to think about is SEO considerations with this. If you change the name, so if you have your name and you say, okay, we're going to take over this location and we want to change the name to ours because we're working on building our brand, our reputation, it's going to tank the SEO. So Google understands who you are and what you're good at based on your URL, your website address. If you change the name of the organization, you're obviously going to change the web address. You're not going to have the old web address with a new name. That is really confusing. It doesn't make sense. So you put up a new URL, you transfer the entire website over, change the name, do all the things. Google doesn't know who you are, and it's also not clear on if it can still trust you. And of course, Google's just a robot, right? It doesn't know that the person that took this website and bought it, are they even providing the same services? It's not sure. Are they going to provide the same quality of services? Do any of those Google reviews carry over? Google doesn't know. So for that reason, what you'll often see is a drop of 50 to 75% of your traffic when you change the URL. Now you can do redirects on the back end. You can do a lot of things to try and bring the SEO juice from the old site to the new site. And if you have a good SEO team, a good development team, they're going to do that. But I can tell you for a fact, because we've done this a number of times, when you change the name, you're going to see a drop. So you have to think about that really carefully, because if you have a lot of qualified inquiries that are leading to new patients from your SEO channel, then that's going to be a significant hit to you as an organization. Maybe you think long-term that's the right move. That's fine, as long as you're aware of what the loss is going to be, and are you able to sustain that loss, or are you prepared to cut expenses while that loss plays out and you're able to rebuild the SEO or bring in qualified inquiries from other channels. So just be very, very careful with the SEO component of things, because you are going to have a loss whenever you change a brand name to a new URL. And then finally, when you're doing an acquisition, make sure that you continue to deliver on whatever brand promises are made whether it's your brand or their brand, that reputation is critical to the success of the organization through the acquisition process. What promises are they making? Are we making sure that we're still delivering on them? That's what we want to do from a marketing perspective. What we don't want to do is if we have a marketing message for the original organization, the acquirer, and then we copy paste that message and add it to the new location when they're not doing the same thing or they're not delivering things in the same way. And then now we have potential for a conflict and negative reputation to be built because what we're promising is not what we're delivering. Even if it's just a difference in delivery that creates market confusion, that can be negative from a marketing standpoint. So we want to make sure that we have unique messaging or consistency. Hopefully that acquisition is delivering care that's delivering on the same promise, or that we're going to ramp it up to speed really quickly so that we can deliver that similar marketing message. Moving on to turnarounds, my favorite. So I grew up doing turnarounds. This is what I spent a lot of my time doing in the education space before I got into healthcare. I spent 10 years doing turnarounds around the world, China, Vietnam, Turkey, the US. And I've done a ton of turnarounds within the healthcare space, from little bitty organizations that are only doing $10 million a year to organizations doing more than $500 million a year. Lots of experience with turnarounds. I love them. I love the puzzle. I love the challenge. It's always something different, always something interesting. There are often kind of similarities across providers in terms of what they're struggling with. So you can take what you learned at one and apply it to another. But there's always something unique about the challenge. Anyway, looking at it from a marketing standpoint, what do we have to think about in terms of a turnaround? First and foremost, there's a reason that things are going wrong. It's often reputation related. Sometimes things have fallen apart operationally, or you hired a new marketing agency, or you had a new CMO come in and they're just totally messing things up. That does happen. And so we can correct that, and it's a much easier fix from a turnaround standpoint. But most of the time it's reputation oriented. You have to get delivery right first. If you have a reputation issue, it's because you're not doing something in terms of your differentiated promise to the community. What are you supposed to be delivering on? Is it speed? Is it cost? Is it quality? Is it the patients that you serve? Whatever the situation is, you need to fix that operationally and from a care delivery standpoint first before we market it. Really important, because if we go and market out there, because a lot of providers want to do this. They say, okay, well, we're short on patients, we're struggling financially, and so we need more patients in the door now. That's absolutely the wrong thing to do. And the reason for that is because you're just going to burn it to the ground faster. Think about going to a nice restaurant. You see these great advertisements for a wonderful steak, and you want to go and you want to eat there. And then you go there and it's terrible. It's rubbery. It's bad service. It's overdone. You're never going to go back to that place again. You're going to leave a bad online review. And so now you're losing customers. You're losing patients. That patient tried you. They're never going to come back, and they're going to tell all their friends and family not to come back. They're going to leave an online review that's bad. That's going to warn away other people that we're trying to market to. So we're just going to burn things to the ground faster. We want to get delivery right first in terms of what we need to fix, and then we're going to market it into the community. What we're doing is it's called a reputation rebuild. I have to go in and now tell the community that, hey, we are doing things right. We're doing things better. We're delivering on our promises. We can be really transparent with that and we say, hey, we messed up, and then now we're doing better, and here's how. Or we can leave out the we messed up part, and we can say, hey, we're doing better, here's how. Or here are some of the positive changes we've made. Here are some of the positive results that we're getting with some of the changes that we've made. And you have to really push that in the community. People don't trust you anymore. They don't believe what you tell them because you've broken your word in the past. They're not just going to trust you tomorrow. They might not trust you next week. So your marketing costs are going to be higher now because you have a reputation problem. This is really challenging in a turnaround situation, because what I'm telling you is that you have to spend more money to try to save your baby. You have to spend more money to fix things operationally, and then your marketing costs are going to be anywhere from 20 to 50% higher. So now you have to spend more money on the marketing side to get in the same number of patients that you had done previously at that spend level. That's a really painful pill to swallow. So when I come into a turnaround situation, I often ask, do we have the capital runway to make this happen? Because we're not going to fix this in 30 days. We're not going to fix it in 60 days. We're going to have to fix operations. Then we're going to have to really spend a ton of money on marketing to get people willing to try us again, to rebuild our reputation. 6 months to 12 months from now, we might be in a really financially stable and successful position. That is a tough pill to swallow, and not all organizations have that runway. So just be aware of that when you're going into a turnaround situation, that you're going to have to bite the bullet and spend a lot more before you can fix things. Related to this is what I call the Midas touch syndrome. This can be really common, especially with new providers. It's related to certain market dynamics, often first mover advantages. You're the only game in town. We'll see it a lot with smaller mom and pop providers more than strategic organizations, but sometimes strategic organizations as well, or private equity got kind of a first mover advantage. They had some kind of blue ocean situation that they moved into. So you start that organization, again, you're getting all the calls. You don't even have to do a lot. You're just successful because there's nowhere else to go. You're the only game in town. Everyone's finding you. The marketing that you do just kills it because, again, there are no other options. And so they see you, they go to you. That's a first mover advantage. The mistake here is that happened because of what you were doing rather than the market dynamic. So this is what I consider to be like Bayesian probability thinking, or if you ever read Andy Duke's Thinking in Bets, it's a really, really good way to break down these causal factors in terms of determining success. Was it my decision? Was it the way we executed? Or was it just the market dynamic? Was it the fact that we didn't have any competition at that point in time? Was demand higher than supply? And so we were going to win almost no matter what we did. We could bleed money out the bottom. We could not have good marketing, but we would still be successful. Sometimes owners or executives think it was all them. And so what we'll see is a spiral in these situations. So they start to fire marketing agencies left and right. They're firing their internal marketing team left and right. They are firing business development outreach people left and right, because the assumption is that, well, I did something right. I built this business. I made it as successful as it is. I can't be doing anything wrong. I must have people around me that are messing up. And the reality of the situation is it's actually the market dynamic that has changed. And what, as painful it is to hear, what you were doing was not particularly effective. You just happened to be at the right place in the right time. And so you were successful, maybe in spite of some of the things that you were doing. As competition has evolved, as supply has risen to meet demand, now what was so easy before is no longer going to work. You have to be very careful with that, because if you have Midas touch syndrome, you're not going to make the necessary changes to the organization. You're going to cling to the things that you were doing before. And those things that you were doing before were not actually what were driving results. It was this dynamic that you were part of. So thinking in bets is thinking about how different factors contributed to the success rates. Was it the factors of our execution and decisions, or was it a factor that was a little bit more outside of our control? So then that means that we have to relearn a lot of things if that was the case. We have to think differently. We have to seek outside counsel. We have to rely on people that have different experience, or maybe more experience than us, more expertise than maybe we thought that we needed originally. So it can be a very difficult ego situation for founders, for executives, for people from PE firms that got lucky in terms of market dynamics. So Midas touch is something that we want to be avoiding as much as possible, and just being open and honest with ourselves, and being open to feedback, and receiving that coaching, and giving everything an honest shot and an honest evaluation. Maybe we don't want to hear it. Maybe it doesn't sound great, but we should be thinking about it. This can also be challenging. I often consider it from a contrarian perspective. So what happens with a lot of really successful executives or successful entrepreneurs is we're part of a smaller percentage of the population, right? We're not doing what's average. What most people are doing is not what we did. That's probably why we had a different success outcome than they did in various domains. And so we start to trust ourselves extensively, because we found out that when we act contrary to the popular or the mass opinion, we've been successful. And so we start to devalue others' opinions. Really logical, makes a lot of sense. We still have to be humble and careful, though, because just because we're right a lot of the time doesn't mean that we're always right. correct? So we still need to be keeping that open mindset to listen to outside ideas and evaluate them honestly, to make sure that even though we're often right when we're contrarian, we might not be right in this case. And so we have to be able to accept feedback, to accept coaching, to accept other ideas, and see if it is going to be the right fit for us in this situation, where it is one of those situations where we're wrong as a contrarian and everyone else actually is right, or someone else is right. In a turnaround situation, we have to transparently communicate. Super important. Just be open and honest. Say, look, we know we messed up. Think about how you want people to respond if they messed up. Do you want them to hide it? Do you want them to lie about it? Do you want them to try and cover it up? No, it just makes you lose more trust in them than you did before. Again, marketing is the same as if we're having face-to-face communication with someone right next to us. It's the 10 people in the room scenario. If we don't want someone lying to us or covering up their mistakes or just not admitting to their mistakes, we don't want an organization who's like that. We're not going to trust that organization. So from a marketing standpoint, from an outreach standpoint, we should own our mistakes. We should transparently communicate what we're trying to do better, what we did wrong, what we're fixing. That's going to engender more trust. It's going to speed up that turnaround process rather than slow it down, or in really bad situations, accelerate the burning. All right, a quick review on a couple of those strategic scenarios. What channels offer the quickest ROI for startups or new markets? PPC. PPC is your starting point for any new service line that you're offering. Now that ROI is a question mark though. Are you getting a return on that investment in the near term? Often not. You're actually probably losing money. Your PPC campaigns are a bit of a loss leader for a de novo or a startup. So just be careful with that. PPC is your starting point. Every other channel is a build. Every other channel is going to take you from 3 to 6 months to be successful with it, to start seeing results from it. And so you need to be investing in those channels right away, because the longer you delay it, the longer it's going to take to get them working. But PPC is your starting point for most providers. If we're doing an acquisition, should we keep the old brand name or change to our own? So again, so those considerations, really who has the better reputation is the one that you want to keep. And if you're trying to build your reputation and you don't want to change a name, then you maybe put your name under the name of the acquisition on their website when you're talking about yourselves and marketing materials, that kind of thing. And then just remember that SEO component. That SEO component can be very impactful in a negative way if we are acquiring a new location or a new service and then changing their name to our name. Once we change that URL, you're going to see a significant drop in SEO. Some providers, maybe they never invested a lot in SEO, so it's not going to be a big impact. But for some organizations, it can be a lot of their new patient inquiry volume. And so we just want to evaluate that before we make that final decision. That should be part of our discussion related to the old versus the new brand name. How do we determine if it's working for us or them when marketing? So that question about thinking in bets, thinking in terms of probabilities. Are we successful because of things we did, or are we successful because of outside events? By the same token, we can have the opposite. We can not be successful because of outside events. We have a black swan event. It's just a negative market dynamic right now. There's a lot of competition. We're making the right decisions. We're doing the right things. But in any decision or action we take, there's always going to be a low probability that it's not going to work. We might be doing the smartest thing possible, something that works consistently for us, that works in our market, that works for our service lines, and still have a 5% chance of it failing, and that 5% chance comes to bear, and there's nothing that we did wrong, right? We did all the right things. So when we think about our probability sets, we really want to evaluate our strategy. We want to look at the data, and then we want to look at the kind of the market dynamics and the circumstances and analyze that to determine, did we make the right decision and do the right things and we just had a low probability outcome? Or did we make bad decisions and execute poorly, and so we ended up with a low or a poor outcome? Both of those things are possible. So when we're thinking in probabilities, we can think about doing things right and getting a bad outcome. We can also think about doing things wrong and still getting a good outcome. So if we are really thinking through all of the components and factors that come into play when we have a final outcome, that should be able to help us parse what was an outside factor versus what were factors within our control. And so then in those situations, if we can determine that right, then we know if we need to make a change or if we need to continue on the same path and just try again because we were doing the right things. And if we do it again, it will probably work because we're at a 95% probability of a positive outcome. If we do it again, it's probably going to work this time, right? But we have to be careful with those things because I see people confuse those situations a lot, and then they will make a change that they shouldn't have made, or they won't make a change when they should be making a change, right? Changes based on the scenario. I think the main takeaway here is just understanding in different strategic scenarios, we have a different marketing playbook that we're going to bring to the table. And so think through where you are, what you're doing, and then how your marketing strategy is going to change based on that dynamic.